It's that time. It's time to share with you the nominations for the 2022 Online Scotch Whisky Awards. Let's go. Hello, everyone. Hello, welcome. Welcome to Friday night. Welcome to Ralfie, not coming in from somewhere in the Irish Sea for a wee change.
Yes, I just happened to be here. It's very reassuring, malt mates. I've not been barred from the VPub. I'm still allowed in.
You're still allowed here. This is actually the first time that we've been sat together since the original stream that we did in 2019. And I think, I know you wouldn't notice this, and I would be worried if you did notice it, but I think I'm wearing the same shirt that I wore back in 2019. Aye, just for as a wee good luck thing.
And have you washed it since you left?
I'm sure it's been washed a couple of times. Anybody, anyway, welcome everyone. I hope you're all doing very well. All that we're going to do tonight is we're going to share with you the nominations. We're just going to run through it, tell everybody what's happening, and then immediately after the stream tonight, this poll will go live. So all these nominations will be available for all of you to go in and place your votes. However, please remember last year, what happened last year, right? Everybody was like, well, where is this nomination? Where is that? Why is that there? It's impossible for us, right? There's only 6 nominations put forward for each category. So everyone is going to be in a situation where at least some of the categories is going to have some omissions as far as you're concerned.
Yeah.
However, what I'll say is that the OSWAs are structured in a way that the people get to have a voice. So as you're going through that poll, the poll that will go live after the stream tonight, there's a wild card in there, the people's choice on every single category.
Yeah.
You can shout from the rafters and say, this should have been in here. And what we do in the award ceremony in early November is we tell everybody there's no award, there's no prize for the people's choice, but we list it as a chart. It's like a top 10, and we'll tell you 10 through to 1 what the people actually expected to be there. Even if it's something that you've already voted for, put it in the people's choice as well. It's fabulous for everyone to see the whiskies that you're enjoying at home.
Yes. So here we are, the second time around, Roy.
Aye.
We've done this before, and I know that a lot of the malt mates in the VPub tonight for the nominations, intimations, there you go, have experienced visiting the OSWA's website, oswa.co.uk, and we've been here before. This is not the first time we're doing this. We've learned a lot and gained, you and I, from that experience. And I think what's been so heartening for us both is that in the actual awards ceremony last year, we've now had over 45,000 views. So we know for sure from the feedback that the OSWAs are meaningful and relevant. And it's quite exciting for both Roy and I to be presenting to you the most transparent, democratic, and useful reference to you, in which, of course, you can actively participate.
That's right. That's right. We've been very transparent about how it's structured. I'm going to give you a quick 1 minute kind of refresh tonight before we release or share the nominations with you, just to let you know just how transparent we are. But if anybody ever wants to kind of criticize or have a wee look under the hood, is providing it's a legitimate inquiry from somebody in a position of legitimate curiosity, we'd be happy to give anyone a look under the hood. Ralphie and I don't fiddle with any figures. We don't. All we do, Ralph, these are not, you're going to see through these nominations tonight, these are not our whiskies.
Yeah.
These are not the whiskies that Ralphie would pick, right? They're not the whiskies that Roy would pick.
Yeah.
Some of them are. Some of them are. The important thing is that whiskey remains a super wonderfully subjective thing. What we have here is a product of all the collaboration from everybody that has a voice in guiding people in whiskey.
Yeah.
And it's changed this year. It's not just YouTubers. Sorry.
Yeah. And as you say, Roy, that there's no reason for us to sort of interfere and try and direct things that you might, and I'm only saying might, find in some other award formats, because it is such a straightforward and effective vehicle, the OSWAs, for letting you provide your experience, your knowledge, your expertise to the wider community. And I must say, last year I found the nominations and the final winners of the nominations really quite educational for myself, because it then gives both Roy and I feedback as to what we, from what your perspective, should be reviewing for you, so long as they're not too expensive.
Yeah, I mean, I did. Last year's OSWAs directly affected my buying decisions round about that time and since. I think we got strong nominations last year. I'm going to maybe venture and say I think the nominations this year are arguably even a wee bit stronger. Does that mean closer to what I would pick? I don't know. I'll leave you guys to decide that. But there's certainly some interesting picks to share with you tonight. Anybody, Tim, Donner Pass Whiskey, I do see that you've bought us a wee super chat there, my friend. Thank you so much for the super chat. I did miss, there was a wee comment there. I don't know if it's probably too late for me to catch it now. I should have frozen it at the time, Tim.
It's busy tonight, isn't it?
It's awfully busy and it's moving awfully fast. But I've caught it there. It says, cheers, Roy and Ralphie. So glad we are here again, and may this continue for many more years. Here's to that, Tim. Donner Pass
Absolutely, yeah.
Thanks so much. Cheers, Tim. Okay, so I think what we're going to do here tonight then is I'm going to just bring up a wee screen share with you so everyone can see just a couple of things that comes up year after year. So I'm just going to say it at the head of this so that you know what's happening. Let's pull this in here and I hope that you can see it. One of the biggest criticisms that we had last year, and it started to rear its head a little bit this year, is obviously the great discussion about price. We're all facing prices creeping up and up and up. And as that continues to be a factor, I think the online Scotch Whisky Awards become more and more relevant.
Yes.
A lot of people are nervous that what we nominate, what we share with you through this initiative, will be ripe for price hikes in the future. It's something that we have to be aware of. We understand this. There's a lot of cynicism out there, but it needs to be called out. So you'll notice tonight, and I'll share this with you, that we have tried to take some steps to protect against cynical price hikes. The first thing that we've done, the same as last year, is that for every nomination that we put forward, we're going to put a guide price in there so you can mark it based on what that whiskey would cost you at point of nomination. Now, of course, it's based on the prices that Ralphie and I buy it in the UK. It's maybe different for where you are. If you're in the North America, it's different state to state. It's different from province to province in Canada, and it's remarkably different right across Europe and Asia. So we know that this is an issue. But you take this as a guide price, and if you see hikes and you believe those hikes to be cynical based on a nomination from the OSWAs, call it out. info@oswa.co.uk. You send us a wee email, you tell us about it, you call it out, and we talk about it.
Yeah.
And it's the reason that we're going to talk about it is because there are retailers out there that have stepped up to say, we love what you're doing. You're talking about not special, not rare, not super scarce whiskey, but whiskies that people can buy right across the world. And most of the cases, the majority of the cases, it can't happen all the time. Whiskey is a batch product. But we're talking about available, attainable, affordable whiskies. They want to step up and support the initiative. And how have they done that? They've signed up to our Fair and Ethical Retailer, where we share who they are on the website. And all we're asking them to do is for the duration of 2022 or until they run out of the stock of that nominated product, whichever comes first,
they
freeze the price. They don't increase the price. That's just a gesture of, and most of the retailers that we work with have ethical policies in place that they would be doing that anyway.
Yeah.
So it's not a huge step for them to step up. But what it does do is it makes a difference. It shows a difference between retailers who are potentially a wee bit more cynical and those that are fair and ethical.
And also, if I could add, Roy, that this arrangement with select group of volunteer retailers is unique to the OSWAs. There's no other award system out there or competition system out there has such a thing in place.
So support the ethical retailers. They're there on the oswa.co.uk website under retailers. And if your retailer near you could be involved, talk to them about it and ask them to reach out to us, and we'll include them on the site. All they need to do is promise that they will not hike prices based on this community initiative. Let's talk about the contributors for 2022. You might remember that last year, this was a very parochial wee YouTube collaborative thing, and that was for a very, very specific reason.
Yeah.
These were trusted partners. These were accounts and people that we knew, and we know what they're about. And we walked to them and said, if you partner with us on this, all you have to do is be honest and put integrity forward. No problem. They were all on board. We managed to put together a collaboration of 24 channels as a proof of concept last year, and it worked very, very well. And it gave us the confidence that we could use the same model, but expand it this year. And that's what we've done in 2022. We've moved it out, and we are now partnering with, as it was locked off, as the poll locked off earlier this week, 56 different collaborative partners. These are people that are involved, yes, in YouTube. We've taken the 24 original channels and we've expanded that. We've added more to those channels. There are commentators, voices, people that review whiskies generally. There are social media account hosts, people doing live streaming and reels and Instagram lives and all of these things. There are people behind bars involved, people on licensed on-trade premises.
Yeah.
I mean, some of the most face-to-face, immediate feedback people. Of course, we want to have these people involved. People who write reviews, people who host and run websites for reviewing whiskey, and of course, even podcasters. We've opened the doors right up this time, and that 56 is growing. Every day, I get an email from somebody else who's saying, love this. How can I get involved?
Yeah. And if I could add to that, Roy, that because last year was the first time round, in order for us to keep control of the situation, because we were doing it for the first time, we approached mainly the YouTube-based established commentators and the wider community that we were quite familiar with. But this year, building and growing on the success, it's going to be interesting to see how a greater variety of whiskey-related contributors to our nominations are affecting what is being nominated.
They are changing it. They are changing it. We're noticing that, because we can't talk about availability and then not have input from people who suffer from availability.
Yeah.
So we're seeing that. We're seeing it all over, and we're seeing more and more interesting additions, more and more interesting things put forward.
Yeah.
And the more variety that there is in there, the more inclusivity we have at the contributor stage, the better. Just quickly, this year, in order, you can imagine 56 contributors, that's impossible for Ralfy or I to manage. It's administratively difficult. So what we do is we have a core group of core contributors, of which there were 16 this year, 16 channels, and core contributors right across the spectrum got together to come up with the nominations. Now, if you ask 16 channels for their nominations, you're going to get at least 16 different answers. So then you have to take all of those nominations and put it out to a wider pool of contributors. And that's what's been worked on over the last 3 weeks. All of those 56 wider contributors working together to refine it, to bring it, to get it, to narrow it down to the top 6 that we are going to share with you tonight. Now, would it be my top 6 or Ralphie's top 6, as I mentioned to you? Probably not. But that's not what it's about. This is not the Roy Awards. It's not the Ralfy Awards. It's the online Scotch Whisky Awards, which means we understand the responsibility incumbent upon us. We're representing the online Scotch whisky community.
Can I just say, Roy, you recovered that very well.
Not too bad.
You're absolutely totally on form tonight. Wonderful.
We'll see. So we know what we're doing here. We know what we're saying. We're standing up and saying, oh, we're representing a lot of folk. So it can't be our opinion. We've not doctored these numbers. These are the legitimate numbers. So if there's a surprise in here, it's something to talk about.
Yeah.
Okay, let's is there anything else to discuss? Or I think it's just time that we take the lid off this thing and just share it with everyone.
Let's take the lid off and share. Yeah. And by the way, Roy, some of these nominations, some I expect to be there, and others I'm surprised that they're there.
I agree with you. There's going to be a nice kind of we'll take a minute out, I think, in between each of the 9 categories just to discuss. Ralph and I are not going to share opinions on any of these whiskies. Of course we're not. We're actually just going to maybe talk about trends or kind of just general feelings or whatever, or takeaways. G Whiskey, Jeff over in Taiwan. Jeff, he's bought us a wee dram. Fantastic, Jeff. So wonderful to have you in. So wonderful to have you as part of the initiative as well. Exciting evening. Cheers, fellas. I'll do my best to last. It's awfully late in Taiwan. What a superstar staying up on a Friday night to hang out with us. Cheers, Jeff. Good to have you in, buddy. And thanks for the dram. Tito Whiskey, I think he's out in Argentina.
Yes.
Spanish-speaking channel, Tito Whiskey. Got his first reached out last year. Loved what we did last year. He's very much part of the picture this year. Thank you very much for giving me the opportunity to collaborate in the nominations, Tito. It's wonderful to have you on board, buddy.
We're very cosmopolitan. You know that.
We are absolutely trying to be. Okay, let's just run through these. I think what I'm going to do is I'll just remind everybody what each of the 9 categories are, and then I'll just ask Ralfie to announce the nominations. First up is a category that's been slightly modified from last year because we realise how subjective value is in whiskey. But what we're actually talking about here with the opening category here is we need to talk about something that's affordable and attainable for everyone. This is the best value whiskey. This is the type of thing that you would recommend to somebody who's just getting into whiskey, who's going to be shocked to hear that you're recommending a 50, 60, 70, 80, 90 pounds bottle of whiskey. Shocked. But if you talk about a 30, 40 pounds bottle of whiskey, maybe that's acceptable to them. But also this whiskey has to bring value, and it has to be good for an experienced sipper too. There's plenty of it out there. There's plenty of it out there. Despite the way prices are going, despite the way things are, there's still lots of this out there. So the way that we described this was fairly priced whiskies that offer great quality and help people take their first steps, yet still provide great value sipping for experienced drinkers. And this is where we'll celebrate the whiskies that are attainable despite continually rising prices in whiskey. Ralphie, take it away.
Rightio. Thank you, Roy. And the nominations for Best Value Whiskey 2022 are as follows. Arran 10-year-old, 46% ABV. Right. Bunnahabhain 12-year-old, 46.3% ABV. Glencadam 10-year-old, 46% ABV. Kilkerran 12-year-old, 46% ABV. Lechake 10-year-old, 46.3% ABV. And finally, Loch Lomond 12-year-old, 46% ABV. Over to you, Roy.
Wow.
What do you notice about these nominations?
Well, I'll tell you the first thing.
Instantly.
As you started to round them off there, it felt like copy and paste from last year, because the Arran, the Bunnahabhain, the Glencadam, if I remember well, were all part of the fixture last year.
Yes.
And then suddenly we realised, oh wait, the Highland Park's gone. That was there last year. It's gone now.
Yeah.
We've got Kilkerran in there, the People's Choice pick from last year. Lechick was very high as a People's Choice from last year, and Loch Lomond also appeared in the People's Choice discussions last year. Wonderful to have 3 brand new offerings in the mix, 3 popular, very current, often talked about. It's certainly in the context of value. I notice here, Ralphie, I wonder if it's going to be a theme tonight, ABV.
These are integrity, what we call integrity bottlings, in that there is not a single bottle in the nomination for best value whiskey at the OSWAs that is a standard 40% product. And this really tells me that those who are going to be voting, and first of all, the contributors for the nominations for the OSWAs, and those who are voting on these nominations are very much aware that the true value of whiskey is not necessarily just the cheapest cost, but the actual intrinsic quality of the event. Therefore, there is a modest premium in the price, but it's for the value that you're getting in context to the price that you're paying in the UK, in the British Isles, right?
Yeah,
is about as good as you can get. And certainly for both you and I on our channels, if we were to review any one of these nominations, we'd be doing just fine.
I think so.
Yeah.
And I think that there are cheaper whiskies out there. There are. And there are a lot of very, very closely run. Ralph and I talked about, should we discuss the ones that almost made it through? But we can also understand how frustrating that might be, not just for the producers, but frustrating also for the community as well. So we're keeping it at 6 to keep it simple. And we'll consider if there's things that we can do with that in the future. But 6 is already a wide enough range, I think. I think that what we've got here, these are relatively, the most expensive one there is the Kilkerran, because in the UK that's recently taken a bump in price. Over the last year it's gone up about £8-10, I would say, and it's still here as a value prospect. And I would suggest that Kilkerran for me seems to be getting better year by year.
It is.
I think everything here, Arran maybe is an exception, but Bunnahabhain, Glencadam, Leitchik and Loch Lomond have all been, remember the theme from last year, Renaissance? Distilleries that have been brought on board to be much, much more focused on single malt whiskey rather than a contract product. Cask management, really putting a lot of thought into the process, best integrity, best foot forward, and we're seeing that carried on then into the bottling. The fact that we can still pick most of these good quality, and as you say, Ralfy integrity whiskies for less than £50, I think they all tick the value whiskey proposition. I think we've done well to start.
Another thing which is glaringly obvious, Roy, is that every single one is a single malt. There's no blended malt, there's no Scotch in this category. Best value whiskey is the category, and the interpretation of whiskey by the providers of the nominations has bypassed blended Scotch, blended malts, and focused on single malts, because that really is it really is the showcase in the contemporary mindset of the whiskey drinker. Is that's where the real quality is.
Aye, and the people involved in curating the nominations and the contributors involved for refining them understood that, because there were non-single malts in the mix. Just so happens the 6 that made it through were the 6 single malts that you see there. Corinne Egloff is saying she's over in Switzerland. She's saying her PC keeps crashing. That must be the Ralfy effect. As long as you don't affect the tech here tonight, buddy. She's saying, but very excited. Have my booklet ready.
Wait a minute, Roy. Don't try and blame me for any bloopers that may occur, because we're not in the bothy here. We're in the fancy Aquavit V-Pub studio here. So,
well, as long as you can see us and hear us tonight, that's all that matters. And I think that so far it looks good. And David Hong has also bought us a wee dram as well. Thank you so much, David. Hello, and thank you both. Thank you very much for your dram, buddy. And Bill Monteith has bought us a wee dram as well to say cheers all. Just popping in to say hi, and I'll catch the rest on replay. So far behind, Bill, don't worry about it. There's no such thing about being behind. Cheers to you all. Thank you.
Cheers, folks.
Are you ready for number 2, my friend?
Category number 2.
Category number 2 is best blended whiskey. Now, blended whiskey, what we're talking about here is a blend of, you have to remember that everything's from the Scotch community's perspective.
Mhm.
So the Scotch definitions are very much part of the foundation of what the OSWAs are all about. Now, it doesn't mean that we're not going to talk about other whiskies outside of Scotland. Absolutely not. You'll realise that there's refinements to all the categories to make it much more inclusive this year. But when we talk about blended whisky, we're talking about a mix of grains typically. We're not talking about just malt made in a pot still.
Yeah.
That's what this category allows. And the nominations will make that very clear that that has been well interpreted and understood. I'll describe it as follows, and everybody that was involved in this, and you'll see this exact same description, blends are not all about mass market consistency. It's often said that a truly great blend, and I know this is a trope, but it's true, can deliver an experience greater than the sum of its parts. Some of the most celebrated whiskies are blended whiskies. This is their category. Take it away, Ralfie.
Rightio, Roy. The nominations, Maltmates, for Best Blended Whisky 2022 are as follows. Black Bottle Blended Scotch at 40% ABV. Compass Box Great King Street Artists Blend, blended Scotch at 43% ABV. Cutty Sark Prohibition Blended Scotch at 50% ABV. Nika from the Barrel Blended Whisky at 51.4% ABV. Thompson Brothers 6-year-old TB/BSW Blended Scotch at 46% ABV. And finally, White Heather 15-year-old Blended Scotch, which I believe, Roy, is at 46% ABV.
Wow, Thompson Brothers, you could have come up with a less tongue twister name for your 6-year-old blend, but people seem to be loving it, so well done.
I handled it, Roy. I handled that.
You did.
Yes.
You did. Less tongue-tied than I did. So we can see here, interestingly, despite now remember, grain whiskey doesn't suffer from the same issues that malt whiskey does. So when it comes to chill filtration and things like that, it's not the same whiskey. But we see that there are two low ABV entries here. Fan favorite Black Bottle at 40% ABV. It's long been one of those blends that's been loved by people that drink blended whiskey. It's changed over the years, but obviously people seem to be enjoying it enough that it's been nominated this time. Compass Box have two blends out there. They've got the Glasgow blend, it's slightly smokier, slightly peatier, and they've got the Artist blend. This is the Artist blend that's been put forward here, both of those at 43%. But the rest of the lineup here, super interesting, 46% and above, 50% in the case of the Cutty Sark and 51.4% in the case of the Nika. So we're starting to see this ABV discussion even creeping in to the blended category, where people seem to be connecting with higher ABV. And that's because why do we love higher ABV, Ralfie?
For the simple reason that it is part of the characteristics of ethanol, also known as alcohol, to actually hold, carry, and then on consumption to deliver the nuances, subtleties, complexities, and fullness of flavour, Maltmates.
It's flavour.
Yeah.
It's flavour. I mean, it's not difficult. It's interestingly, people think it's to do with alcohol and consumptions of alcohol.
Yeah.
But the higher the ABV of the glass of whiskey, the slower you have to sip it.
Yes.
So it's cask strength whiskies and higher ABV whiskies force you to slow down and take it easy. And
key to what you say there, Roy, is that clearly the nominators have been looking for a variety of blended whiskey nominations, which are for sipping, not for mixing. And I think that reflects the audience that you'd have for the OSWAs. Sure, Black Bottle, lovely with ginger beer, and it's a 40% ABV, ready to go, ready to mix, and one you'll find in many British bars. But not so much the Thompson Brothers Tongue Twister 6-year-old, but 46%, interestingly, and Integrity Bottling's going in with a young company going into the blended Scotch. Do you think, Roy, there's a redefining of blended Scotch happening at the moment in light of the fact that people in the future may be more in a tight budget?
I listen, budget's going to play. If budget isn't already part of it, talking of budget, I just want to mention I've taken this down and I can pop it back up again because there was a mistake. Despite you and I going through and doing a proofread on top of my multiple proofreads earlier today.
What mistakes?
We made a mistake on price there. So we do need to mention it because I had a Nika from the barrel up as £27. Now, if anybody can get Nika from the barrel for £27, I'd like to know about it. But that is a mistake as me, so I think I've been able to go in and just quickly fix that price.
And I was just going to go out and buy a bottle. Well,
yeah.
I'm not going to buy it.
I think it's just the prices were maybe swapped around or confused a wee bit.
Yeah.
But however it is in the form when you're voting, the prices will be correct, and I will double check that. But yes, Nika from the barrel's a wee bit more expensive than that. Is also, Max Kreitner and as well as some other people, I noticed pointing that out. And thanks, Lee Hosey Whiskey Fly for the dram. Yeah. Sorry, Ralph, on you go.
Worth noting that Nika from the barrel is a 50 centilitre bottle. All the other nominations are 70, or if you're the United States, probably 75 centilitres. But that's a slightly smaller bottle, so it will take the price up a little bit further in relation to the volume that you get. But hey ho, that's the nominations for the OSWAs.
Yeah, and what you will notice in the voting, you're reminded in brackets, it says 50 CL in brackets so that people know that is when they're comparing it. Just to bear that in mind. And also Nika from the barrel is blended whiskey. It's blended world whiskey because there's we believe there to be a significant proportion of Scotch whiskey in there as well as Japanese. It's not a blended Japanese whiskey, but it is a blended whiskey from Japan, which are two really quite different things.
Absolutely. One of the Japanese whiskies that we're actually aware of, the fact that there are guest whiskies from other countries.
Aye. It's just... it doesn't make it. I mean, I think it's all about transparency. It doesn't mean that it's a bad thing. It's okay to take multiple whiskies from multiple countries and make a nice, tasty blend. But be transparent about it.
Absolutely.
Just tell us what it is.
Yes.
Don't try and sell us something as Japanese or as whatever the country may be, and we discover that it's perhaps something else.
Yes. It leaves a bad taste.
Anyway, to continue the blending theme, we're going to move into a very different type of blend now, where blends are using all sorts of grains. Blended malt is only malt whiskey. Malt whiskey is a very specific product made from 100% barley in a small batch way, using a pot still. It's very different from things that are made in a continuous fashion through a continuous still. Malt whiskey is a very different thing. It's just a different drink. We know that it's a different drink. And most of the people in our community, not all, but most of them tend to favour malt. We are promiscuous. We like to try other whiskies too. So when we talk about blended malt whiskies, we are specifically speaking about blends that utilise only malted barley. That's what this is about. And the way that we describe it is that where blended whiskies use different grains, these use only malts. Blended malt is a fast-growing category. It's difficult to keep up with the amount of new blended malts that's coming onto the market. Often very good quality, flavour forward, affordable, well-presented whiskies. And as I say here, some of the most interesting and attainable releases in recent times have actually been blended malts. This is where we celebrate them. So category 3, Ralphie.
Righty-o. Thank you, Roy. And the nominations for the category of Best Blended Malt Whiskey 2022 are as follows. Campbelltown Loch Blended Malt Scotch at 46% ABV. Compass Box Orchard House Blended Malt Scotch, 46% ABV. Compass Box The Peak Monster Blended Malt Scotch at 46% ABV. Johnny Walker Green Label 15-year-old Blended Malt Scotch, 43% ABV. Thompson Brothers 8-year-old SR V5 Blended Malt Scotch at 48.5% ABV. And finally, Douglas Lang Timorous Breasty Meet the Beast Edition which I believe is a 13-year-old, 52.5% ABV. Over to you, Roy.
So what's interesting here is that if you were to ask people across the world to give us an example of a blended malt, the first thing that pops into head, it was there last year, it's here this year, Johnny Walker Green, it's there. We have to remember with Johnny Walker Green, and it is updated on the form, it's a 15-year-old product at 43% ABV. That's the only one that is light on ABV, and I say light in a very... The rest of them, you can see that ABV theme is there.
Yeah.
This is not Ralfy and Roy, demanding it because it's our personal preference. This is a community preference. Campbelltown Loch, they've reinvented that brand because it used to be a blend. It used to have grain whiskey in there. Now it's a blended malt, and they've brought it back to 46% ABV. Compass Box has been doing great things with blended malt whiskies over the years and have actually helped the whole category be reconsidered. Peat Monster is their product as well.
Yeah.
Timorous Beastie I think it's fantastic to see one of the remarkable regional malts from Douglas Lane represented here. This is exactly where you would expect it to be because that entire range is blended malts. Big Peat, the Galdrons, Scallywag, Rock Island, the Epicurean, all remarkable regional malts. So they've got the Timorous Beastie is represented here, their Highland one. But interestingly, the one that's been celebrated is the 13-year-old at 52.5% ABV. It's no mistake. We know this. We know that when the ABV is left intact, when it's left at higher strength, that it does help us access flavour. And it also gives us the flexibility if we are adding water to bring it down to where we find our preference.
Yeah.
These higher ABVs whiskies also give us that flexibility.
Something that really jumps out to me, Roy, with these nominations is that you have the juxtaposition. Right,
juxtaposition. Yeah.
Thank you very much for helping me out there.
I know half the word and you know the other half.
Yes, we'll put them together and eventually get something. Is you have the very widely available, highly accessible, and very reasonably priced Johnny Walker Green Label, because you're struggling to find any whiskey at 15 years old at that sort of accessible price on the general market. So widely available, and it's sitting right next door to the Thompson brothers, who are really new on the scene, and yet they're really they're doing what Compass Box did when it started. They're stepping back with their experience, overlooking how they can reinvent the blended malt category to bring something which is just going to genuinely excite people. So I think you've got a fantastic array there of some whiskies which are quite very available and easily recognized, and some which people will be seeing probably for the first time, particularly if you're out with the UK. Thinking in particular of the Timorous Beastie, and that you mentioned that range from Douglas Lang, which has been very successful and is well worth exploring in terms of value, bang for your buck, blended whiskies. And I think that there's more awareness and consciousness now out there in the wider whiskey community that blended malts are not necessarily the cast-offs. They can offer a great experience at a more accessible price, and then to top it all off, the collectors and speculators are just not interested in blended malts. They want the single malts, so they leave the blended malts alone.
I'm getting a hard time from the chat as well. There's a typo in here, but I can't fathom where it is.
Right, are we to find a typo?
It doesn't matter.
It does matter.
As long as the message comes along.
Timorous meet the Beast blend. Beastie. It's not the Beastie. Is it the Thompson brothers? Johnny, not the Green Label blended. That's fine. Peat Monster blended. That's fine. That looks all right to me. I don't see any spelling mistake.
Well, I mean, I've been over this thing 2 or 3 times, so I'm blind to my own typos. It tends to be the thing. So if it is in there, hopefully it doesn't, and it's not really affecting anything. I'm just going to echo what Ralphie said there. I think it's quite amazing By the way, both these Thompson Brothers releases I've been able to buy them. They're fairly widely available in the UK. I don't know how much further outside of the British Isles it's actually managed to get, but that they are showing just by bringing that product out with that presentation, that integrity at that price point, £35 for an 8-year-old blended malt, 48.5% ABV. Everyone's connecting with it.
Yeah, I still haven't spotted a spelling mistake yet.
Maybe it's not. Maybe we're okay. Graham Young's
So
bought
wait,
some jam though.
someone says sorry, no typos. Someone's gone in.
Oh,
you scrolled past it. So there is Rui Parada. Sorry, not typos.
No typos, just sheer mistakes.
A mistake.
You've got us all panicking there,
Yes.
Rui, but let us know. Listen, Graham Young's bought us a wee jam to say this format and the event is absolutely wonderful for the entire whiskey enthusiast community. Thank you both, Ralfy and Roy, Aquaviti, for your vigilant work. Glad to play my wee part in the fun. Graham, thanks very much. Maybe I should sign you up for some proofreading as well.
Yes.
I think we're okay. I don't see it, but
we're doing fine.
Okay, so the next category, just to clip on, we're still on bottles at this point, is best non-malt whiskey. Now, I want to talk about this because I've talked about the idea of there being blends made up with different grains and malt. What we're talking about here is, okay, we're going to spend a lot of time celebrating our love of malt whiskey, but there's millions of other grains making fantastic whiskey out there. You've got rye, you've got corn, you've got wheat, you've got all of these other mash bills that are bringing different whiskey experiences. And if we honestly say it's about flavor, then we should be experiencing all of these different whiskies. Yeah. Even if you decide you don't love them as much as malt, at least it reassures you that your lane of enjoying malt is the right lane to be in.
Absolutely.
So let's have a wee look at this non-malt category. And here we describe this one as there's more than one kind of whiskey. The category is open to all grain types, excluding malt. So that's rye, corn, wheat, and anything else that's included, opening up many other styles of whiskey, including bourbon.
Yeah, we're very cosmopolitan here.
It's the Scotch Whisky Awards, but that's from the point of view of the Scotch whisky loving community. Yeah. That doesn't mean that we don't drink and enjoy other whiskies. Take it away, Ralfy.
Rightio. And the category, blended non-malt whiskey 2022, are as follows. The nominations are Elijah Craig Barrel Proof Kentucky Straight Bourbon at 60% AV plus ABV.
I don't even think I've seen one as low as 60%. It's always way high, 60s and above. Yes. But anyway, sorry, yeah.
Four Roses Single Barrel 100 Proof Kentucky Straight Bourbon, 50% ABV. Loch Lomond Single Grain Peated Scotch, 46% ABV. Redbreast 12-year-old Cask Strength Single Pot Still Irish at 56.3% ABV. Wild Turkey 101 Kentucky Straight Bourbon at 50.5% ABV. And finally, Wild Turkey Rare Breed Kentucky Straight Bourbon at 58.4% ABV. There's a few we've seen before making a return.
Listen, you'll remember the Redbreasts. There was quite a few mentions of Redbreast in the OSWAs in 2021. Certainly Wild Turkey 101 was there. Certainly Wild Turkey Rare Breed was there. In fact, in this category for non-malt, and I think it makes sense, we've got 4 bourbons in the mix. What's interesting to me is 2 things. The theme of ABV is certainly part of it here. On those bourbons, there's not a single bourbon under 50%.
Yeah. And
also the wide range in price here.
Yes.
You know, we've got a bourbon here at £33 for that wonderful value Wild Turkey 101. And then we've got, in the States, you can pick this up. If you find the Elijah Craig, you can get it cheaper than £120. We appreciate that. If we want to pick that up in the UK, it's anywhere from 80, 90 to maybe over 120, somewhere in the order of 120. But what is interesting to see here, Single Pot Still Irish has made it through.
Yes.
And what's this? This really, really inexpensive single grain peated from Loch Lomond. This is an interesting one because this is malt. But they can't sell it as malt. It's sold as a single grain. There's no other category to put this in because SWA regulations mean this has to be sold as a single grain. Why? Because they make it in a continuous still.
Yeah.
It's rendered a single grain whiskey. So if they mix it with malt, for example, it would become a blended Scotch whisky. Incredible. The SWA is just the legacy regulations we have. Sorry, Ralph.
Yeah. The SWA, of course, being the Scotch Whisky Association, which is the group within the industry which has a sort of policing, regulatory, industry supporting role. And they help to advise distilleries on what they can and cannot do so as that there's no confusion. And by and large, they do a pretty good job. I mean, there's some things now and again which I certainly don't agree with, but they have a very positive supporting role in helping to, in the likes of Loch Lomond single grain peated, which is, it is not a standard recognizable Scotch whisky. It's frankly peculiar.
And I kind of like that about Loch Lomond. And I know that in the future there may be other distilleries out there that's able to kind of bring things along that does tie the existing framework for the regulations up and knots a wee bit. But there we have it. This is the only category that product could go in. It literally tells you on the label that it's a single grain product. And this is where it has to stay, despite the fact that we know, if you're in the know, you know that it's actually made from 100% malted barley that goes through a column still. Very, very interesting.
Yes, and therefore it's not single malt.
Yes.
And also they have to have both Wild Turkey versions back again being renominated from last year. It shows you that the Scotch whisky perspective of non-whisky definition is actually referring to the USA. Because apart from many Scotch Scotch whisky drinkers will, as an alternative, not just go to rum, but first point of call is American matured spirits made from mixed mash bills. And it's good to see Four Roses single barrel. It's a good, consistent bottling, and I have nothing more I'd want to add about that.
I think what's interesting about the four bourbons, and if you remember the discussion from last year, Wild Turkey was loudly talked about. If you're a Scotch drinker and you're curious to try bourbon, Wild Turkey is probably your stepping stone into that.
Yeah.
Again, it seems to be a bourbon that sits well with a Scotch drinker, so it makes sense that, again, it's appeared here in the nominations. Exact same as last year. Listen, it's terrific to see all of these whiskies, I'm sure, are being enjoyed out there by the community. That's how they've made it through as a nomination. Terrific stuff. Let's come away from bottles for a wee minute. What we're going to do now is we're going to talk about producers for a second. We're going to talk about three categories, focusing on, producers. That is best distillery.
Yes.
A repeat from last year. Best new distillery. The only thing that we've changed from last year is that Ralfie and I had to work out how to define what a new distillery actually was, right? Yeah. So we've basically got this moving window of 10 years. So whatever year the OSWAs are in the previous decade, if the distillery was founded, if spirit ran within the first 10 years before that initiative, then they would be considered a new distillery, and then it's a rolling kind of thing going forward. Yeah. So eventually people like the Wolfburns of the world, the Ardnamurchans and things, they're not going to be new distilleries for much longer, and that just makes sense. But the other producer category we're going to talk about is independent bottlers. So that's the next three categories coming up. Let's start with this best distillery. I describe it as which producers are bringing the best experiences in 2022. Many are committed to available and affordable quality, while others sometimes chase what the market will stand. Certainly in terms of price, we celebrate the former.
Yeah.
Take it away, Ralfie.
And the nominations for Best Distillery 2022 are as follows. Ardnamurchan Distillery, West Highlands, Scotland. Isle of Arran, Lochranza Distillery, Western Highlands. That's Island Distillery.
It is. That's okay.
It's Scotland.
Yeah.
Bruichladdich Distillery, Islay, in Scotland. Glen Distillery, Campbelltown, Scotland. Loch Lomond Distillery, Southern Highlands, Scotland. And Springbank Distillery, Campbelltown, Scotland. There you go.
Now I'm looking to remind myself what was in the best distillery category last year. Ardnamurchan was there last year, but they were a new distillery.
Yes.
Because they were founded 2013, First Spirit in 2014, still very much available. They would still be considered a new distillery, but no, they've been actually put forward here as best distillery. This is compelling. Arran, I think, was in the running alongside Bruichladdich last year.
Yeah.
Springbank, of course, was there last year. In fact, that's their incumbent winner. They won last year. And we see two new entries alongside Ardnamurchan. Interestingly, both now I consider it, both of these are from the same producer.
Yeah.
This is Loch Lomond Group, Glen down in Campbelltown, and Loch Lomond.
I find it quite intriguing, Roy, that Loch Lomond Distillery is suddenly making this appearance in a number of categories. And I think one of the reasons for that is that
this is the third Loch Lomond category so far. Yep.
That you've got a relatively large distillery, which not that long ago was very unglamorous, and I'm being quite tactful when I say that. But it's received a massive funding turnaround, and you can see in particular that it's really kind of connecting quality-wise with what it actually produces. And it's one of the distilleries that I must admit that I don't automatically go to myself because of previous permutations of Loch Lomond.
Yeah.
But I mean, I'm increasingly sort of thinking, well, it's becoming more available. The caliber of the bottlings is definitely trending towards the integrity side of things. And you've got Ardnamurchan, which technically is a new distillery, but it's established an awful lot of reputation in a very short space of time.
I mean, it's incredible. And please remember, there's people going to be chiming in here because their favourite distillery isn't mentioned.
Yes.
Where is this? Where is that? Where's the next one? And I'm so shocked that this isn't here. Listen, Ralfy and I were in silence at some of these. When we were putting these together after the poll closed the other day, we're just looking at each other going, because these are not our picks either.
Yeah.
We have to represent what the contributors decide as a group to put forward, because that's where we've found consensus. Where the most people are getting the most engagement in these products or products from these producers. Mm-hmm. This is what it is. Ralfy's right. We see a story of renaissance here. We see a story of renaissance from Glen Scotia. We see a story of renaissance at Loch Lomond. It's happening right now. It's getting better all the time, I think. Springbank, rock solid torchbearer for how it should be done to the entire industry. How transparent do you want it to be? Bruichladdich will show you, and Ardnamurchan will show you what transparency is. And we don't need to talk about Arran any more than just the fact that they won best value and they won best overall Scotch in the opening inaugurals last year.
Yeah.
All of these distilleries deserve to be here. We know that there's a lot of missing distilleries that people are going to wonder why they're not here. I'll tell you why they're not here, because there's only 6 slots. But based on the votes of 56 independent whiskey commenters, contributors, creators, however you want to refer to them, these are the ones that came top.
Yes.
Quite astonishing, honestly speaking. Let's move on quickly, Ralfy. I think we'll just go straight into the best new distillery.
Indeed.
And as I've already mentioned to you at the outset of the producer section here, the way we describe this is we're talking about this whiskey boom that we're in now, and we're experiencing an unprecedented time of growth in whiskey. Mm-hmm. New products coming from new producers like never before. It's a wonderful time. It's hard to keep up.
Yeah.
In this category, we'd like to highlight the new producers who have been founded in the last 10 years in recognition of their achievements. Mm-hmm. Let us know what they are, my friend.
And the nominations in the category of Best New Distillery 2022 are as follows. Ardnamurchan Distillery, Western Highlands in Scotland. Bimber Distillery, London, England. The Cotswolds Distillery, Cotswolds, England. The Glasgow Distillery, Southern Highlands, Scotland. Isle of Raasay Distillery, Western Highlands, Scotland. And Torreveig Distillery, Western Highlands, Scotland. Although I might add, Roy, that my personal sentiment is the last two are island distilleries.
Well, they absolutely are. They are islands. I mean, and I like to refer to islands as its own category. I really do. But and part of, we talked about SWA, their regulations are that islands are part of the Highlands. So you might find when you're voting, you might see the description say Western Highlands bracketed islands. It's the same thing. We're not kind of trying to rub the SWA up or anything. They list them as Highlands, no problem. The SWA does not have granular Western, Southern, Eastern, Northern Highlands. This is us adding this in here, just to be clear. The reason that we've put this in here, and I was struck by this, is because you can see the why is it we keep continually talking about the west of Scotland, the Western Highlands? 3 of them in here, and we saw that there were the majority in the previous slide for best distillery. That is interesting, but it's great to see, again, a little bit of a mini renaissance in Glasgow. When they came out with their inaugural, I think they got it wrong.
Yes.
They've redressed things. They've moved quickly away from 50 cl bottles to 70 cl, kept the price the same. I think that's made a difference here.
Absolutely, without a doubt.
And now that their spirit has been handled a bit better, been put together a bit better, it's a bit more mature, people are starting to sit up and pay attention to this Glasgow distillery.
And I tell you what, Roy, people will be sitting up and paying attention to the fact that if you're a haggis basher and you're an absolute staunch Scotch whisky fan, the fact that 2 English distilleries have been nominated in the online Scotch Whisky Awards for Best New Distillery, well, that's nothing short of incendiary. Roy.
I know, the cheeky.
But it's not our fault.
But the thing is, this is that I say this regularly. Nothing guarantees good Scotch whisky more than good English whisky, right?
Yes.
If what's happening south of the border, listen, we're seeing it happening in Ireland. We're seeing it happening with new distilleries in Scotland. We're seeing it happening everywhere. There's an explosion of new distilleries. Well, that's all great. These new distilleries need to be bringing good product. I can think of a handful of other English distilleries that should be there.
Yeah.
I can't say them here now because the ones that we're celebrating are on the screen right now. These distilleries deserve to be here.
On merit.
Absolutely. It's not Roy and Ralfy standing up and saying this is the community that's saying these have had great experiences with this.
Yeah.
And remember the core foundation of the online Scotch Whisky Awards: attainability, affordability, integrity, value, price, value. And all of these distilleries, you know, they're not, it's not luxury goods products that they're bringing out here. Some of them, some of the releases, aye. But for the most part, with very few exceptions on this list, they're bringing whiskies that made people sit up and pay attention.
Yeah.
Benny Fries has bought us a dram, a very generous dram. Benny, thank you so much. He's over in Denmark, isn't he? Good evening, guys. Thanks again for doing this regarding the specific bottles categories. If a voter has tried only 2 of the 6 bottles in a category, should he bypass that or vote? Your take. The way you need to think about voting for the OSWAs, Benny, and this is very important. If you see something in a lineup, it's going to be unlikely that everybody's tried every whiskey that's in the Online Scotch Whisky Awards. We are asking you to vote for something that you would buy yourself, that you would repurchase yourself, and certainly to vote for something, and I think this is a really important thing, that you would recommend to a friend. That's what we do in whiskey. Everybody that's put the Online Scotch Whisky Awards together, that's their place. That's why they're involved in this initiative, because they are involved in guiding people in whiskey. If you see things in that lineup that you would buy and that you would recommend, you can place a vote for it. And you don't need to know absolutely every whiskey that's put forward in the OSWAs. Also, in the People's Choice, repeat that vote or replace it in the wildcard People's Choice section with something that you feel is missing, something that you would maybe even recommend or purchase ahead of what you voted for. Nobody is forced to vote in any category.
Mhm.
If they don't feel they can make a meaningful vote in any category, they can simply skip by selecting no vote and moving on.
Yes.
So if you don't feel confident, if you don't feel like you've got enough experience in that category, don't vote. It's made very clear if you follow the voting process. I hope that helps clarify things a wee bit, Benny, but it's a good question. And buddy, thank you very much for your ram too. Cheers.
Cheers.
Okay. The last of the three categories that's dedicated solely to producers is independent bottlers. This is a thing that's close to Ralph and I's heart, honestly, but a lot of the time I think we struggle to talk about individual bottles from these independent bottlers because maybe 250 bottles is the maximum yield from a barrel.
Yeah.
It doesn't spread, it doesn't go very far. So we know that there's certainly a bit more limited value in reviewing these whiskies. We will review them and talk about them from time to time because there's a backstory or a context or a bigger topic to discuss. But I think what we want to do here is not talk about individual single casks and things, but talk about producers who are bringing compelling product that speak to us, that we've found fantastic engagement and flavour in. Independent bottlers remain one of the most wonderful aspects of enjoyment of Scotch whisky when you're an enthusiast.
And importantly, Roy, Scotch whisky as an industry is very fortunate to have a wide variety of responsible and experienced independent bottlers who are bringing whiskies to the market that they haven't distilled themselves, not necessarily. Sometimes that is the case that they have. But the independent bottling scene for Scotch whisky is way ahead of the independent scene for, say, English whiskey, Irish whiskey, American bourbon, or rum from anywhere in the world. And it's one of the real strengths for Scotch whisky is that depending on your location, you have this whole extra array of frequently very exciting, peculiar, non-conformist bottlings, which if you're an experienced whiskey drinker, if you've started with the official bottlings and got your bearings and your points of reference, it gives you something genuinely original, interesting, and exciting. And of course, independent bottlings are not in the collectible category for most of the time. And as such, the affordability of them can at times put official bottlings to shame.
That's absolutely true. I mean, it's especially the independent bottlers are fantastic at accessing distilleries that are not only just less sexy, let's say, distilleries, but often distilleries that for a lot of the community would be unheard of.
Yeah.
Balminac and Glenlossie and Glen Spey and all of these distilleries that you wonder, oh wow, because they're not very well represented by official releases.
Yeah.
So we get this fantastic opportunity through the independent bottling program. It's wonderful how kind of collaborative and symbiotic the Scotch whisky industry has actually been through its history.
Yeah,
that this remains very much part of the scene today, and long may it continue. Anyway, that's where they will. This is where we'll celebrate them. And Contour Bushcraft is what we dram to say thank you all for your hard work, guys. I'm sure Darbusser's Wireworks will be there next year. That's White Peak Distillery, fantastic whiskey they're bringing out. Listen, they've only had 1 or 2 releases out so far. I don't doubt that you're absolutely spot on with that prediction. It would be very interesting to see in the future if that's the case. And Justin Wan has bought us a wee dram as well to say, always amazing to see Ralfy on a live stream.
Oh, you're too kind.
What are you?
It's because I'm not stuck in the dreary, dismal bothy. Look at these luxuriant drapes and the mood lighting. I tell you, this is so theatrical. It's not whereas the bothy is just basically a dump, but it's fine. It's a cozy dump.
Justin's asking us what are you two drinking tonight? Well, because it's the OSWAs, we don't want to be leading anything in it. We're drinking 2 glasses of cold tea, aren't we, Ralph? Right?
That's it.
We're enjoying our cold tea. Justin, cheers to you, my friend. Cheers.
Cold tea. I'll behave yourself.
Aye. Terrific stuff. Okay, let's get this vote underway. I've described independent bottlers here as, and this is on the vote. This passage is there. All these passages are there for you to read before you place your vote. We are privileged in whiskey that we can enjoy our favourite spirit not only through the official releases, but also from independents with a different take on things, focusing on quality at a fair price. We celebrate the indies who have excelled. Ralfie, who did the 56 contributors for 2022 decide have excelled?
Rightio, and the nominations for Best Independent Bottler 2022 are as follows: Adelphi Selection, Gordon and MacPhail, North Star, Signatory Vintage, the Scotch Malt Whisky Society, and finally, Thompson Brothers.
Wow.
Right. How do we read this?
I have to say that this looks very similar to last time around.
But not quite.
But not quite. There is a difference. And there's one. This is the third category now we've seen this tiny, tiny producer, this tiny distillery, making a name for themselves in the OSWAs, not from what they're distilling, but how they're approaching whiskey. And that's the Thompson Brothers.
And there's a reason for that, Roy, and it's the power of the internet. They have a good connection with the online, some of the online community, and this project at the distillery, which the name of which briefly escapes me. It's up North Highland.
Dornoch.
Thank you very much. At Dornoch Distillery, which is they're basically Thompson Brothers' core project. But while the whiskey's maturing from Dornoch Distillery, they are acting as independent bottlers. And they really are shaking things up. And because we're now in the age of the internet and very rapid communication, they're getting spotted very quickly, not because of the tub thumping or their marketing, but just because of what they're doing, what they're bottling, and how much they're asking for it in the market. And as they say, the cream comes to the top. And there's some... I mean, I've reviewed one of their bottlings recently myself on my channel because I was particularly impressed with it, despite the fact that it had a weird label with what I thought was a whale, but was in fact an orca. But, thanks to the malt mates, they kept me right. But we have in this category, we've got the largest independent bottler in Gordon MacPhail, and we've got the North Star, which started out quite small, but is growing rapidly and sustaining its reputation. We have the Scotch Malt Whisky Society, which was originally a mutual members whisky club, which they bought. I think the first barrel they bought way back in the 1960s, around about then, was a barrel of Glenfarclas, which they basically needed a group of friends to split the barrel up. And it just basically, the barrel rolled from there. And the Scotch Malt Whisky Society certainly gets a lot of attention amongst the whisky aficionados in the UK and across Europe.
I think that what's interesting is that we did get a lot of feedback because SMWS has a membership before you can buy the bottles. So you pay money before you can even buy bottles from them. And there was a lot of people really upset about that. For everyone, depending on where you are, this is purely down to you and how you perceive one of the core foundations of the OSWAs, that is value. For me, SMWS offers value because they have partner bars local to me. Yeah. If you're in North America, SMWS offers value because they give you access to the Balmenics, the Glenlosses, and the things that we talked about earlier.
Absolutely.
And nobody else is bringing that easily to all the states in America. SMWS brings the value proposition is different for everyone. Yeah. It's harder for independent bottlers to do and affect those things. So this is it's always going to be a little bit eclectic, this list here. But I think what's shocking to me is that there's one independent bottler here, and for the second year in a row, they're not here. But this time around, I expected them not to be here, and that turned out to be the case. There's a long-established independent bottler that isn't shown here, and I know that a lot of the chat are asking about it, and I think that's down to changes in direction that we're all feeling right now right across Europe from Cadenheads. I was surprised that Cadenheads weren't there last year. A wee bit less surprised this year. It's going to be interesting to see what happens there long term. But as you mentioned here, North Star are making a name for themselves that they build on year after year. Gordon MacPhail recently have moved to 46% ABV natural presentation on everything except their Discovery series.
Yeah.
Distillery labels, Connoisseur's Choice, 46%. Fantastic. More of that, please. Adelphi selection has always had that. Adelphi's already, year after year, it trades on very small batch, limited availability, but high quality bottlings. Signatory vintage, often you feel like it's everyman's. Budget, entry level price product, unchill filtered series, cast strength series, lots and lots of really interesting, widely available products from one of the deepest stocks out there. And Thompson Brothers, brand new onto the scene.
Yeah.
And you talk about the internet, you talk about them harnessing the internet. What has that cost them? Nothing.
Very little.
All it's cost them is bringing good quality liquid, and everybody talks about it. Everybody talks about it.
Essentially, they seem to have a knack. They've found the secret sauce of letting the product do all the marketing they need for them. What a diverse array of Scotch-based independent bottlers we have here, from the very well-established, reputable Adelphi, who can be seen to be on the expensive side, but the quality of what they often are bottling is excellent. And then, yes, you mentioned the everyman bottler of Signatory and their ever dependable Kulilas that they bottle, for example. So a great diversity within this single category of independent bottler. And it's going to be very interesting to see how your votes pan out, because all these are your decisions, malt mates, when you vote.
And I think that I know a lot of you would look at a product on the shelf and say, why would I buy from an indie when I can buy an official release that's branded from the producer? The best way to answer that question is for you to buy the indie, because you very quickly work out it's a different value proposition. It's a different offering. It's a different take. It's just a wonderfully varied landscape to be enjoying whiskey through. Thank goodness for the indies. Yeah.
Yep.
So there we go. That's us covered the producer section. I think now, if I'm counting, that's us covered 7.
Correct.
There's only 2 categories.
2 more to go.
Yeah. So we're now back in a situation where we're talking about bottles again. And the reason that we keep these 2 till last is these are probably the most broad brush categories. It's the world whiskey category and the best Scotch whiskey. This last category, the 9th category, is the only one that I think I'm right on that there's only one that we exclude everything else apart from Scotch. Just let us, as a Scotch whiskey community, just let us have one category that's for Scotch. But I hope that you realise that all the categories that we've shared with you up to date for 2022 is fully inclusive, and that is certainly true for this next category.
It's very good illustrative category for the diversity of the palates of people who are often single malt or just generally Scotch whiskey sippers. And it shows the outward look. We're always in the outward look for alternatives. And what are other people doing? What's their interpretation of this category called whiskey?
And I think if we do pursue flavour, we do love to pursue flavour. You talk about it a lot over it and in the Bothy. You talk about flavour. But if we are pursuing that, then it just makes sense that we would be promiscuous, that we would explore and look elsewhere for that the flavour prospects.
Yes.
20 years ago, world whiskey would have been a dangerous territory to explore for flavour, right? Yeah. That's not true in 2022.
Far from it. It just shows you, actually, even in one year, just looking at the nominations alone, you have some repeats within the categories, but others
fresh things coming in.
Fresh things are coming through, and already you can give an indication as to, well, we don't even know what to expect for next year.
Yeah, it's exciting times. We hope that if the online Scotch Whisky Awards remain true to its current structure and form, we should see consistency year after year, but we should also see it representing the changing landscape and the fresh aspects coming into it. Yep. Hopefully, if it's right going forward. Okay,
so far so good.
Yeah, let's share the best world whiskey the way it's described
Right.
For the things is I talk about it as this category celebrates the best the world has to offer. We're experiencing unprecedented growth everywhere in whiskey, honestly, but absolutely in global whiskey production. And this category recognises that phenomenon with products from any country, anywhere. All it has to be to fit into this category is to be whiskey or whiskey.
With an E.
Whiskey without an E, whiskey with an E.
With
If
an E,
anybody
yes.
sweats the way that we're spelling whiskey, there's a problem, right? It's all the same. Okay. Take it away, Ralphie.
Thank you, Roy. The nominations in the category of Best World Whiskey 2022 are as follows. The Cotswolds English Single Malt Whiskey at 46% ABV. Dingle Single Malt Irish Whiskey with an E at 46.3% ABV. Kavalan Soloist Vino Barrique Taiwanese Malt Whiskey at 56.3% ABV. Old Forester 1920 Prohibition Style Bourbon at 57.5% ABV.
Oh.
Powers Johns Lane 12-year-old Single Pot Still Irish Whiskey with an E, 46% ABV. And finally, Redbreast 15-year-old Single Pot Still Irish Whiskey, again with a little E, 46% ABV. Well, the Irish are dominating in this category.
That's strong, isn't it?
Yes.
But then you look at it and see the diversity, because the Irish have half the category, but only 2 are single pot still Irish.
Mm-hmm.
1 is a single malt from Dingle. Then
Yeah.
we've got an American whiskey in there in the high ABV 1920 Prohibition style Old Forester.
Yeah.
We've got probably, I think, that certainly up until this point in time, the most expensive, the most
Without
premium.
doubt, yeah.
This is a 200, maybe different where you are. If you're in Taiwan, maybe in the States, you might be able to pick this up less, but I don't think so. Kavalan Solist Vino Barrique is now £200 and above.
Yeah.
Pretty premium product. But then look at the other end of the spectrum. England, again.
Mm-hmm.
The Cotswolds has been nominated again because it's available, because it's an integrity bottling, because it's affordable, and people are enjoying it.
Yeah.
English whiskey in the best world whiskey category, along with an American, a Taiwanese, and 3 Irish. Fantastic stuff.
Mm-hmm.
But again, Ralph, we look at the ABVs here.
Precisely. Not a single 40%er, not a single chill filtered. I can't comment about the addition of the burnt sugar caramel colorant, but we really are seeing the interpretation throughout all the categories coming from people who obviously know whiskey, are focusing on best presentation delivery in relation to the value of the money you're paying. So we're really, this is all the sipping stuff. This is all the premium stuff, and very much reflected by our 56 nominators. And what I notice immediately, just looking at this category, is not just the diversity and the cost between them, which is significant, from £39 for the English single malt whiskey, non-age statement, but representing very good value for money at that strength. Bearing in mind that in the UK, you pay duty, additional taxes over and above value added tax that is calculated on the actual strength of the alcohol bottled. So this represents particularly good value for money. And already we're seeing Cotswolds, presenting itself as a light keeper, a beacon holder for the growing emergence of English whiskey, which I don't mean to be cynical about it, but if there's anything going to help keep Scotch whisky producers on their toes, it's probably not me and you bumping our gums online and marking disappointing bottlings down. It's more likely saying, hang about, we cannot possibly allow English whiskey producers to do a better job than us.
Especially when you and I are quite happy to queue up and buy that English malt whiskey because we know it's bloody good.
Absolutely,
This is about if we
Mhm.
talk about quality and integrity, you can't talk about quality and integrity and then turn your nose up at something because you think they shouldn't be. English malt whiskey is a thing.
Yeah.
It's a very good thing. Now, there's 30 to 40 English malt whiskey distilleries sprung up in the last 15 years.
Mhm.
Huge. But the scale is tiny. These are all small batch, small outturn distilleries. Some of them have been there for a little while. St. George's down in Norfolk, they're larger, they're bigger scale. You can see that in the availability. But we have to remember that all of these, as we speak in 2022, are still small.
Mhm.
But in this community, even the Scotch whisky community that we represent in these awards,
Mhm.
they're making waves.
And
And when they do scale up, if they
Yes.
maintain that quality,
Yeah.
that's going to start changing the way that everybody looks at whiskey and this wee island in Northern Europe.
Yes. And the internet's got a lot to do with this, an awful lot to do with this. Because as much as marketing reaches out from companies to try and persuade the consumer to buy the product, and it's generally a very conservative message for most of the time due to restraints and regulations and dogmas, you've got this new kid on the block, the internet, still in its relatively young years, going out and connecting good distilleries to more proactive customers who are not just being led by what's discounted in travel retail or in supermarkets or in Amazon in November, but are proactively looking for good value, interesting, authentic, original flavors. And nothing delivers that more successfully than good old-fashioned alcohol.
Listen, before we get into the last category tonight, the final category about the best Scotch whisky for 2022, just to remind you how things are going to work going forward. After this stream tonight, I'm going to drop, in fact, in the live chat, before I kill this stream tonight, I'm going to drop the link that you can go over to the OSWA.co.uk website and you can start to vote. Now, don't think that you've got lots of time and I'll wait. Go in. If you want, register a vote. Do it right now, because between now and when that poll closes on the 16th of October, you can go in and adjust and edit your votes at any time, because we understand what whiskey is like. What you love today might not be what you love next week.
Yeah.
The OSWAs might be actively encouraging you to maybe try different things. The next bar pour that you order might be a wee bit different from what it was last week because of this. And it might mean that you reframe your preferences.
Yeah.
You can go in and edit your votes at any time. So as long as the poll's open, you have control over what you vote for, and you can change your mind on both the votes and the People's Choice wildcards. That will be live immediately afterwards. That stays open, as I say, until October 16th. Then Ralfy and I kill the poll, and then we start to process, we crunch the numbers.
Yes.
And that's not just counting who's come top, who's the winner, it's also collecting all the data feedback from the community and the People's Choice, the wildcard, collating that, putting it together in a format that we can share it with you.
Yeah.
On the 5th of November. We'll be sitting back here again, hopefully, all things being well, but that's also a very noisy night in the UK. It is what it is. It's the only night that we could find to do it. So if there's fireworks and noise coming from outside, we just need to deal with that. But 5th of November, we'll be back here and we'll share with you what the winners are for each of the 9 categories. And of course, the top 10 chart for each category based on the People's Choice, based on your voice. So it's very important that even if you vote, even if you repeat your vote, if you endorse your vote in the wildcard People's Choice, that you take the time to do that. It is optional. Everything is optional, but we encourage you strongly to do that. I'll drop in the link at the end of this stream.
Absolutely, Roy. It's your participation and getting in touch with your friends and talking about it in your own social media and in your forums and around your whiskey clubs, because there's no other awards structure, anything like this. It is the most democratic, the most inclusive. And I think, in my opinion, and I'm sure speaking on Roy's behalf as well, it makes it the most exciting and dynamic and most relevant.
You could argue that it's too inclusive, it's too open, it's a popularity contest, just throw it out there and whatever comes top comes top. But that's not what's happening, because the contributors get together first. We take our place as informed contributors. That's what we do. We give guidance on whiskey, we give insight, we give opinions on whiskey. We take our place to curate these nominations in the first place. So this nomination process that we're sharing with you tonight is a huge part of the Online Scotch Whisky Awards. A huge part of it. Then what actually happens in the awards is the amount of feedback that we get from the community, because the winner is chosen by you. And everything else that was not mentioned, everything else that we should have mentioned, and everything else that we did mention and you agree with is also talked about in the People's Choice.
Yeah.
And we try to find transparent ways in order to feed that back so that everybody can enjoy that. The data that we generate would be super interesting for folk, but we're just going to give you the top 10 people's and People's Choice and the winner as well. Ralfie, here's our final category for tonight. Here's I don't want to call it the big one, but it's kind of what we're asking for here, still with the foundation of the OSWA values in place, attainable, affordable, integrity, good quality. Value does not mean cheap. You can pay a wee bit more for a bottle of whiskey, but it has to be something that you would be recommending.
Yeah.
You would be going back to buy again. It's brought you good value. We describe this category as the Scotch whisky should be something that is attainable, offers value, and is widely available. Here we celebrate our Scotch whisky community with the best the category has to offer. When you're ready, Ralfie.
Here we go. And in the category of Best Scotch Whisky 2022, the nominations are as follows. A Knock 18-year-old single malt Scotch. Ardnamurchan cask strength single malt Scotch at 58.7% ABV. Bunnahabhain 12-year-old single malt Scotch at 46.3% ABV. Glen Victoriana single malt Scotch at 54.2% ABV. Kilkerran 16-year-old single malt Scotch at 46% ABV. And finally, Lechake 18-year-old single malt Scotch at 46.3% ABV. Back across to you, Roy.
Wow, I want to be reading the chat right now. But it's really hard. I'm just concentrating on these wee six.
It's flying by, Roy. It's flying by on your screen.
Concentrating on these 6 bottles of whiskey, just looking at them. There's so much to talk about. First thing is obvious. 2 things that are obvious to me. Glen Victoriana is there again this year. I thought it was maybe a bit of a one-off last year. No, this has been enjoyed. This is a high ABV product, but this is a wide, high outturn cask strength. It's not cask strength, but let's call it high ABV batch strength, let's say. Quite incredible. We've got a similar scenario to 2021 where the RN10 was put forward in the best value opening category and in the best, in the last category. We've got the same happening here with Bunnahabhain 12.
Yeah.
So the same thing could theoretically happen again. We've got Lechake 10. Also, we've got the Lechake 18 in this category.
Yeah.
We've got Kilkerran 12. We've got this big older brother here again in the 16-year-old. And we've also got one of my, I can't lead it, I'm just let's just say I'm grateful to see one of the integrity bottlings from Knockdhu Distillery and the Anok being represented in the Online Scotch Whisky Awards.
Yeah.
But I think the one that's really shocking me is we've seen Ardnamurchan talked about as best new distillery. Ardnamurchan talked about as best distillery. And with their cask strength release, which was only released in February of this year, they've just released news this week of releasing another batch of this. 35,000 bottle outturn. It was a large scale outturn. They're bringing it out again. That has landed well. A lot of people are loving this whiskey and talking about it. To have an Ardnamurchan in this lineup is, quite frankly, it's astonishing. Honestly, I'm astonished.
And 56 people this year, much more than last year, 56 people have nominated these whiskies within this category. And again, we're seeing diversity of the less expected. I mean, Annock, I didn't expect to see that there at all. I didn't think enough people took this whiskey seriously and gave it due respect. Ardnamurchan, for such a young single malt, giving, it really is hitting people's radar. The Bunnahabhain, again, from last year, making a reappearance, and this growing awareness of the substance that the Victoria Anna, which is becoming actually a bit of a generational classic of a whiskey.
Despite it being a relatively new product, right, in terms of years, right?
Absolutely. But we've got older whiskies, by the way. They're not 10 and 12. We've got a non-age statement whiskey, which is going to be relatively young. And then you've got this selection of 18-year-old whiskies. So that the definition of Scotch whiskey, particularly in relation to, when you look at the price there, you're getting age at not a huge premium. Sure, you're paying more for it because it's older. It's 6 years older, 8 years older than your standard 10 or your 12-year-old single malts.
I think it's my guess. I haven't done any analysis here, but my guess is that based on the category last year, I think the average price has come down this year. I think what's been put forward are slightly, but there's nothing in treble figures here.
No.
What we noticed in the world whiskies and the last category last year, the prices were so we don't put any caps on pricing. People have to interpret value in their own way.
Yeah.
But I think the most expensive product we see here is the 18-year-old Annock, which has recently just taken a jump. You used to be able to pick this up for £75.
It's true.
But we can see that everybody's affordable is different, of course.
Yeah.
But there's no super premiumized products here. These are drinkers' whiskey to each and every one of them. Drinkers' whiskey.
I would just like to add, Roy, that if you were basically treating yourself to a birthday present or a present at the end of the year, because the best presents we ever receive are the ones we buy for ourselves, that you could literally take all 6 of these bottles for your whiskey collection and you'd be absolutely made for the year.
Absolutely. In fact, these 6 whiskies is a beautiful flight of whiskies. Yeah. You've got the decadence of an Annock 18, that lovely Christmas cake sherry thing. You've got the power and the coastal gorgeousness of, listen, if you're worried about not being able to afford or find your good quality Taliskers these days, Ardnamurchan's got your back. You've got that lovely decadent sherry take, an Islay sherry take from Bunnahabhain. For an Islay, there's virtually no peat in there whatsoever. It's a sherry forward whiskey, fully natural as well, for £44 and 12 years old. Glen Scotia Victoriana, wonderfully challenging whiskey, bold, industrial, sometimes agricultural, all over. It's one of these whiskies that literally grabs your attention every time you go in for a sip. Kilkerran, how can it be that Kilkerran are now in probably batch 3, I think, of their 16-year-old product? That's how long, maybe batch 2, don't quote me on that, but this is how long Kilkerran have been around. These guys are no longer a new distillery. And as years go by, this product is becoming more and more dense, more and more complex, more and more compelling. And Leitchick, well, we're weaving the benefits that we put into Burn Stewart 20 years ago, the changes that they made at Tobermory, Deanston and Bunnahabhain. We're enjoying the quality of it now.
I can remember the days, Roy, when Leitchick was barely even mentioned. There was a few bottlings in a really plain, simple, feeble cardboard carton, and they were constantly the cheapest whiskies that you could buy in a shop.
That's right. Non-age statement and the wee skinny bottle.
And time and time again, when you see a struggling distillery under much more dynamic, positive, and assertive leadership, it is just remarkable how an ugly duckling can be so rapidly changed into a gilded swan. And it's not just Leitchick. You see the same thing with Glenallachie, a virtually anonymous distillery. You see with some other distilleries where we literally bypass the bottlings at the moment. But in our heart of hearts, we know these are great distilleries. It's just that their presentation to the market is nothing short of pitiful.
It's that disconnect that seems to happen. The whiskey's mature.
Yeah.
All they've got to do is get it into a bottle and get out there at a good price to the right people, and that's where the disconnect happens. And sometimes it's stripped, sometimes it's water diluted, sometimes it's coloured within an inch of its life. These are all cynical practices. And when it comes to malt whiskey, I know that we can't just continually be snobby about whiskey, but I'm talking about malt. It's a precious liquid that's been laid down for years and years and years to get to a point, only for it to be stripped before it goes into a bottle, because of this idea of mass market and things. When, if you're asking people to drink neat whiskey for the first time, 40% is already hot. Give them it at 46, fully natural, give them all the flavour, give them all the texture, give everything, nothing taken away, because it's the same. The barrier of entry, that 40 to 46, it's not that big a difference. And with the extra flavour, the extra mouthfeel, the extra texture that 46 and above gives, I'm speaking about malt whiskey, and I'm an enthusiast and a geek, and you're going to hear me talking about this forever, not because I hear it from Ralfy, because I've tried hundreds and thousands of whiskies. And I know,
excuse me, hundreds and thousands of whiskies.
Hundreds of whiskies, potentially thousands of whiskies.
Right, that's fine.
And I know from my experience that the most compelling whiskies are ones that are presented naturally. We know this. It's not because we just go on what other people tell us. Our palates and our experiences inform us that that's the case.
It's purely the rate of experience now is far greater than it ever used to be. It's literally one generation before Roy and myself. You would have people stick with their favourite brands and they wouldn't budge from them. And often it was basically what they could afford. And it was down to that if you're going out to the pub, it would be a blend. And if it was something special for a birthday, well, you might get one of the basic single malts. And that was basically it. But my goodness, so much has changed so rapidly and is continuing to change. And what I find fascinating already, having 2 OSWA nominations in which some of them we've been comparing this year's to last year's, is goodness knows what it'll look like in 5 years' time.
I mean, it's amazing to me to see things like the prevalence of Ardnamurchan, of Loch Lomond, of the Thompson brothers coming in, and so many kind of fresh expressions to mix in with some continuity from last year.
Yeah.
That's a really encouraging thing to see. People are already talking about how to vote, which way to go. Whiskey 101, Nick, good to have you in, buddy. He's bought us a dram to say great effort. Amazing hard work and commitment to keep this going. Thank you both and all the contributors. How to decide. I know that's the problem now. And listen, I'm going in and I'm testing the vote, and I'm testing the vote with the live nominations. I'm thinking, this is not going to be easy for me to pick. Rob Nines is in. He's bought us a wee dram as well. No comment from Rob, but I appreciate it. Thanks, Nick, and thanks, Rob. Thanks for your drams and friends. Cheers.
And could I just offer a big vote of thanks at the moment to Patreon supporters on Roy's channel, Aquavit, and on my channel, Ralfy. Our Patreon supporters who subscribe to us each month for the extras that we deliver are in fact funding this. There's not a big cost involved, but we do have to run the website and we do have to post out awards and pay for frames and certificates and gilded stamped.
The cost in this is
cost
time.
And all
it's
this.
Time. It's just time.
It's a lot of it's time. There is a cost, and it's our Patreon subscribers. And that's many of you folk who are watching here. So you support this. We do not get any financial support whatsoever from the Scotch whisky industry or anybody else because we simply do not ask for it. These awards are truly independent.
We would have to be very careful about how we funded this going forward, because right now this is integrity forward. Ralph and I are just doing this off our own backs, and we are also getting an amazing amount of contributions from all the other 56 contributors out there that are spending their time just basically waiting to hear what we suggest that they do next, and they go off and do it. And it's all for free. It's all for the love of whiskey, and it's all because they believe in the concept.
Yeah. And finally, a shout out to Graham, who is our malt mate, who's handling our social media, our Facebook and Instagram, an absolute great guy. We haven't told Graham this yet, but we're going to organise a wee treat for him as a thank you for all the support he's giving us to look after the social media and the outreach of the OSWAs.
And I'll tell you how that happened, that serendipity thing. Last year, we relied on James and Simon and Menno to run the social channels on Facebook and Twitter and Instagram. They did a great job, but they were all doing it individually. And this guy came up to Ralfy and I in the Bonaccord one day and just to talk to us and shake our hands. And then later told me what he did for a living and then said that he would love to support in the OSWAs directive. And I thought, this is just perfect. It's like whiskey gave us this guy. And so if you say hello to Graham on social channels, on Twitter, on Instagram, and on Facebook, he'll be floating around in the background helping us to get the word out there.
Thanks,
Again,
Graham.
He's doing it for absolutely free. But we will find ways to treat him, as Ralphie says. Listen, everybody, I hope you've enjoyed that. It's wonderful to see so many of you still in. How are we getting on? Still over 600 of you in, and even after the fact that we've shared everything. So here's what I'm going to do in the background right now, as promised. I am now floating in the public poll. I've now saved that. If I go to, let's try it here. I'm going to try, am I on this is off screen right now. Let's bring it back on screen. So if I go to oswa.co.uk, let's see if it's live. It is now from this very second, and I'll do a wee screen share for you. Here's the OSWA's website here.
Yep.
And if I roll over here to public poll 2022, there we go. Over to you. It's now live. So there's you fill it in. You have to sign in with a Google account. Of course you do. But if you're on YouTube talking to me and Ralphie right now, you've already got that account, so that's no problem. And if you want to refresh yourself, have a wee look at this category that's just gone live as well. That tells you absolutely, it reminds you of everything that we've shared tonight. So there you go. The nominations are there, and the instructions on how to get involved. How to participate, how to place your vote. Remember, it's live until October 16th.
Yes.
And even if you vote tonight and change your mind tomorrow, or on the 15th of October, or last minute at midnight on the 16th, you can still go in and edit it. I really hope that you tell everyone about it, everyone that is the ability to place a meaningful vote for a completely open and inclusive initiative. I hope you encourage the sharing of it. For the next 3 weeks, there will be people get tired of hearing about the OSWAs. Hopefully everybody's going to be talking about it, but it's there to help everyone, and it's just for these 3 weeks of the year.
And it won't be that long now, pals and malt mates, before the final ceremony of the results of the nomination, as voted by you, will be presented from this studio by Roy and myself. And if we can beat last year's viewing figures of over 45,000 views, we will be absolutely delighted. So we're looking for you to spread the word and let your friends know and get as many folk involved with the voting, and then you can join us for the actual awards ceremony, and we're going to beat last year's viewing figures because it's there to be beaten.
Well, let's hope so. Let's hope so.
You're being quite conscious.
Cautious.
I feel positive. I do feel positive.
Yeah, I think that hopefully it will grow with the support of the community. But if it doesn't, I want the interaction, I want the meaningfulness, I want the integrity of it to continue to grow. Yeah. And the rest of it, the viewing figures and things like that, will take as a bonus. Doc has mentioned what the typos were tonight. He's talked about it being Legic 12 should have been a 10-year-old, absolutely right. And the Peat Monster is 46, not 56%. I can tell you that on the website, they are correct, and I'll double check the poll afterwards, Doc and everyone.
Right.
Thanks for pointing out Roy's fat fingers. A wee drama's come in. I hope I've not missed that. I might have picked it up. Not a few coming in right at the end. Raphael Nardi, thank you very much, Raphael, a member of my channel for 7 months. Dave in BV has bought us a dram, and he's bought us a wee gold sticker. Thank you so much, Dave. Thank you to you. And Sandy McDonald, a small contribution to the OSWA's fund. I'm surprised Ben Romack has not been mentioned at all. Ben Romack need to go in the same direction as Gordon and MacPhail, the parent owners, moving. They're giving us their lovely contrast series at higher ABV. They're giving us their cash strength. We can taste how wonderful Benromac is, but their core range, even at 21 years old, is a 43%. I think that if you're a mass market whiskey, I understand, but Benromac's pointed at enthusiasts. I think that there's a disconnect there. That's my own personal opinion, and I can talk about it because they were not nominated this time around, Sandy. But I'll raise this glass to you, my friend, up north, and say sláinte. Sláinte to Dave, and sláinte to Raphael. Cheers.
And thank you, Roy, for doing all the graphics. Very smart, very neat.
Typos and all, eh?
Typos and all, but don't worry about it. Don't worry about that, because they were your typos and not mine. So people watching know it's not just Ralfie that has the bloopers.
I know, there's a blooper every week. There's a blooper every week on the Aquavitae channel. They all know about it. Listen.
But hey, we're honest. We don't edit them out. We don't try and rerun it all and make excuses. We let the bloopers go because that's real life.
I'm going to pour a wee bit more cold tea so that I can raise a glass.
Oh my goodness, I tell you what.
So you've got plenty
cold
in
tea
your
was
glass.
never so tasty.
I'm going to just raise a glass and say thanks to everybody for participating and joining in tonight. It really means a lot. A huge thanks to all the contributors for their trust and everything that they step forward with, to Graham over there in Cumbernauld looking after our social media, and just everyone in general that's helping us bring this thing together. I can't wait to sit down with you at the start of November and tell everyone how this is all gone. And until then,
yeah. So far, so good, Roy. So far, so good. Cheers, malt mates.
Cheers, everyone. Thank you so much. Sláinte.